That is a terrible scene to open with. I had no idea what was going on. I was honestly bored by it.
I think I agree that it's a bad scene to open with. And that might be a bad
That's a hot take.
But
hey, welcome back to the Marty and Jaden show. We're really happy to be with you. I'm Marty, and this is Jaden. And we finally read the first part of The Way of Kings and the Interludes.
We're in. We're officially into The Way of Kings.
We are in The Way of Kings. And it was awesome. There are some awesome things that happened in the book, and we want to talk about all of those things. There were the 10 heralds. There was the assassin in white. There was Kaladin going from army all the way into his whole experience as a bridgeman. Then Shallan, we find out she's trying to steal a soulcaster from Yasna. Ton of really, really good stuff, including the interludes as well.
They were interesting, less interesting probably in the main story, but maybe that changes over the course of the rest of these books. I know the interludes are sometimes kind of hard to get through, especially if they're a new reader. That might be a little bit difficult to keep your focus trying to learn like 5 new storylines all at the same time.
Did you find them more interesting this time with the reread?
I think so, because I recognized more. I feel like the first time as a new reader, I was absolutely blown away. I even remember when I first read the very first part with the heralds, like all 10 of them in a line with their swords and everything. I was like, I asked you, I texted or called you or something, and I said, is this important? Do I need to know this? Should I reread it later? And you're like, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I know. So it's funny that he says that now, because now having read more of the books and everything, I promise this is not a huge spoiler. Side note, we're not going to try and do huge spoilers this episode.
No spoilers in the podcast. That's the rule.
We will spoil what we read about, though, and things that are previous in the future sections and things like that, but we will not spoil the future of the books or the future of this book or other books and things like that.
Got it. And we'll actually divide it up. We were talking about this a little bit before we hit record. What we're going to do is we're going to create a separate, shorter video that we're going to post a day later than the regular podcast. And that's going to be including spoilers and foreshadowing and our thoughts about the rest of the books and how things all intertwine. I think that'll be more exciting, and it'll keep it as a clean break. If you don't want a spoiler, just watch the podcast or listen to the podcast, however you ingest podcasts. And then if you are interested in the spoilers and our thoughts on how these things extrapolate across the rest of the entire Cosmere, which I think is a pretty cool conversation, definitely catch the videos that are going to be posted the next day after the podcast airs. And make sure you subscribe on YouTube, because I think that's the only place that we're going to post them.
And press that little alert button thingy.
All of them. All of the things.
All the things.
Any button that you can click on in the vicinity of this video that's not someone else's video.
Or the X button.
You should click on that.
Don't click on... Great.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah, they'll figure it. They're smart. But I will say, it was funny that you were saying that you said that I said that, because now knowing that part of the Heralds, it feels more important as we get more in the books, and I'm starting to understand it more, and it's just so much more fascinating.
It's hilarious and so intriguing to meet people again.
Yes.
So when Dalinar first shows up, and you're like, oh man, I know so much about him. And you just jump back into the story from the beginning.
When did Dalinar first appear in this part? I'm trying to remember.
He is at the end. Is it the last interlude, or did I read too far? Oh no.
You read too far! That's okay. That's okay.
Did I?
It's right after the interludes. They introduce Dalinar and Adolin. And
so you're saying we've already got into a spoiler. We just spoiled right after we talked about
ruined for you. I close your ears, close your eyes for 5 seconds.
I'm not editing this out because I'm not that good.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just so you know, the page next is spoiled.
Yeah, so you'll have to make next week work. You'll have to be listening to the podcast next week.
We're sorry.
And I really hope people are reading along with us, because as you were saying, re-meeting people and diving back into the stories for the second time is really interesting. Yes. Anyone who's rereading the book with us, I hope, has those same experiences, but being able to see the heralds, having read the rest of the Stormlight Archive, is pretty cool.
Well, the whole herald scene just gets me every time, right? Because
betrayal.
The betrayal, dude. They're betraying Talm.
Yep.
This poor guy is going to have to suffer thousands of years. It looks like it's been 4,000 years at least since the desolation has happened of just torture by himself. Does that make the torture worse?
It has to make it worse. There's no way it wouldn't, because they have to feel bad. Otherwise, they would have done this a zillion times before. We know that this isn't the first time they've done it. What's crazy to me about that whole scene at the beginning with the heralds is that I don't understand how that decision was made. And they don't really clear any of that up for you. No. You know that Kalak is coming to Jezreel for the first time. He's just meeting up with them. You have to assume that the rest of the heralds kind of trickled in as well. They didn't all 7 or 8 come together at once, make a decision, and Kalak was just doing his own thing. Yep. It has to be that there was some sort of, one person might have been involved and then was convincing them as they came in, like starting to get this group think going. I don't know how it must have worked, but in order to betray one of their own that I assume that they're really close with, they have to be close with each other. They're the heralds.
Well, and I almost threw in some spoilers there. We'll have to get into it more later.
It.
I won't do it. I just think that is incredible. And that also hit me the first time I read it too, that like, wow, these guys are really in despair because they've gone through this pain and torment for like, I don't know how many times. We don't know how many desolations they've gone through at this point, especially. And so and it doesn't really matter how many they've gone through. This is for years on end that they have to get the torment of
Seems like thousands of years.
Yeah, they describe like the claws, that it feels like claws ripping out your skin. Like horrible. And so you can almost understand why they're like, you know what, I'm not doing that again. And poor Talon over there, you know what? None of us are going to choose to go back there. He has to go back.
He's on his own. Well, he's already there.
Yeah.
We have to assume.
Yeah. And that's like something else that we just found fascinating as well, is just that Talon he's always the one in the book that picked the most dangerous battles because he wanted to choose the unwinnable fights. And is that because he knows everyone's going to be coming back with him anyways and they're abandoning him? Is that even more betrayal? Because if you go into a fight just saying, yeah, I'm going to die, but everyone's going to come back with me anyways, then you don't even get the decision to come back and say like, well, like I lived and I'm not going back. Do you see what I'm saying there?
I totally agree with you. I think since we know that they're immortal, basically, some version of immortal, basically, that means that they know. I just feel like life in general becomes so boring. So So you think you need some tearing of flesh to make it interesting? Maybe not quite that intense. But I do think that Talon specifically just shows his true colors, shows his true values by choosing those unwinnable fights. Because it's like, you can coast through life if you know you're going to be immortal anyway. And just like do what Jezreel and Kalak are all doing. Like, they do their part, they fight the war, win the desolation, then go back to Braze and be tormented. They just keep going through the motions, right?
Yeah.
But Talon, I feel like, is how can I be more of a contributor to society? How can I take on a challenge? How can I continue to improve myself and be better and better and better? Not unlike a certain hero of the story that we will meet and talk about in a second, Kaladin. But I do think that that's a cool representation of who he is as a person and what his character is, of continuously striving to improve, contribute, and take on unwinnable fights. And it says that sometimes he wins them. So
yeah, and so
he's got to be impressive.
He's got to feel awesome about winning those fights.
Pretty awesome. Right? I feel awesome about him.
Yeah, I know. I feel great for him too. Yeah, I just love that beginning scene. What do you think about the scene? Do you think it's a cool scene to open with in the Way of Kings, or do you find it boring? The only reason why I ask is that I have a friend of mine who's read this recently, and he said his opinion is like, that is a terrible scene to open with. I had no idea what was going on. I was honestly bored by it.
I think I agree that it's a bad scene to open with, and that might be a bad
That's a hot take.
But the reason I say that is because if you haven't had a lot of experience with Brandon Sanderson, that's how he does it. Like, you got the chapter intros of every chapter through Mistborn and the Stormlight Archive where there's like random snippets that mean nothing to you. You have to read at the beginning of every chapter.
But they're also slightly intriguing.
There's random interludes you don't know anything about with random people you've never met before. All these things happen. He's continuously introducing new ideas and new thoughts. I can't even begin to understand how all of this swims around in Brandon Sanderson's head, but he's trying to make it on us as well. Like, it's all swimming around in there at the same time. It makes more sense as you kind of organize it across the entire Stormlight Archive, and you've read them all, and you can start to understand that. But before that's happened, and when I first read this, I wrote that whole first scene off.
Yep.
I remembered something about swords, and I moved on. Like, nothing else made sense to me. I didn't know what a herald was. I didn't know who these people were, random names. Like, is it Kalak or is it herald? Is that like what? Is one a name? Is one a person, a type of person? It's too confusing.
Do you think that it made a difference that you listened to it with audio first versus on paper? Did you read it? Wait, question. Based on the last one, did you listen to the audio this time or did you read this time?
So, for the first 50 pages, I read this time.
Yep. Yep.
Which is also what taught me that Zeth starts with a Z. Or an S.
It starts with an
I
S.
thought it started with a Z. Now it does, in fact, start with an S. Like, learning more about the characters, I think reading it was interesting to me. I could stop and pause a little bit more as I was reading it.
Yes.
And kind of digest. I will say, when reading a book for the first time and introducing the characters, I will personally vouch for the fact that reading the physical book is better. Yep. 100%. Something about the visual ability to see a name or to see a place, to like commit that shape along with the sound that you're making in your mind to memory, helps to keep things straight. When all you're hearing is a sound and you're trying to decide like who's who, I think it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
Like everyone's name ends with R, ith, or something. It's just really confusing.
Well, I will jump in and say that's actually the one thing I do like about the audio is because usually if you have a good reader, which I think Michael Kramer is fantastic.
He is.
You can get a different
Shout
voice.
out.
Shout out to Michael Kramer. Shout out. But he, what I would say is, I'm like losing my train of thought. No. What I would say about that is that they use different voices for the different names, and so you're able to know which person is who based on the voice and everything. But I totally also get like seeing the names and hearing them. And
it does make a difference. It really does. I think this time especially.
Yes.
Reading it first. Read the first few chapters and then you can listen from there.
Yes.
That's what I will say.
Oh, and that's actually how I did it the first time, right? And I think that the first chapter for me, I didn't feel that way. I'm like, this is a cool chapter. Because I was really just taking in that they were going through the suffering and then they made a decision like, I don't want to suffer anymore. I'm like, what does that mean? And I was just so intrigued by it all. But I can totally see how listening through an audiobook or just for some people in general, it can just go through in one ear and out the other because then you just jump into the next scene, which is Zeth's scene.
You're trying to keep track of everything. And honestly, if you miss that trade over and you don't know that that's how he does his preludes and prologues, it's like, is this the same story? Is it the same person? Was Zeth one of those heralds that I just totally missed? It's hard when you can't physically be reading it. And I think I'll probably die on that hill. If you are starting a new book or a new series or a new like magical realm, a new Cosmere, read the first few chapters out of a physical book, even if it has to be like an ebook or something. But if you're reading it, you will be able to retain a lot more of the separation of characters and storyline to then listen to the rest.
Fascinating.
100%. That is my recommendation to anyone who's reading it for the first time.
I like it. But that next scene though is super good with Zeth and the assassin in white. That's
a powerful scene. Might be the most powerful scene of this first part if we end up doing a ranking later on.
Yeah, we were thinking about doing this, right? We were talking about it. I think each week we're going to start doing a power ranking of our top 3 scenes. And it'll be a rolling ranking. So these scenes can be toppled by next parts in the book. And so by the time we finish book 1, we'll have our top 3 scenes. You can agree with us, disagree with us. That's fine. I just think it'll make for some interesting conversation. But I think that this scene with Zeth is definitely got to be one of our top 3.
Well, right now it's number 1 because we haven't talked about the rest of the book yet. So for now, number 1 is Zeth and his assassination.
Yeah.
Which is in itself crazy.
Yeah.
He's manipulating everything. He's changing gravity. He's slicing through rocks, and it's wild. The whole thing is just a wild battle.
Well, you're just learning about this. You're learning about shard blades that you can cutting through rock like water.
Shard plate, all the different mechanisms of how that works.
Oh man, and the whole scene's incredible because this guy going through it, you can tell that he doesn't want to be doing this, and he just feels bad about it all. But how about that scene? So he's trying to kill the king, and
before he knew he was the king?
Before he knew he was the king. Yeah. And the guy runs off, and like, that must be the king, gotta fight off this guy with the shard plate and everything. Then he stops and turns around and realizes that's the king.
Where would you keep the king if you could protect him?
Dude, so brilliant. Honestly, that's a great storytelling thing, but this is one of those moments where I'm like, huge props to Brandon Sanderson to having such a cool idea of just how like brilliant that is. I'm like, oh, that's actually really smart to do it that way.
I wonder, it's like how would he know they didn't have like 2 sets of shard plate and shard blades?
That's a good point, but the other guy wasn't running away in a shard plate,
that's
right?
So the one swap, that's what got him. That makes more sense now.
Yeah, it wasn't they both ran away in shard plate. It was like, this guy is in shard plate. Who
would you rather, a bunch of bodyguards with nothing or shard plate,
right.
where would you keep your king?
But, and I kind of like looked at that too, and I thought, is that still the smartest move? But I really think it is, because Gavilar, he points out in there, classic Sanderson, all those like little doubts that you have. He's like, I know what you're thinking. And like, I'm going to address the thought right now. And he does this right here. He says, Gavilar is known for being one of the best fighters in the army. Like, he is one of the best swordsmen.
So plus shard plate, plus the shard blade should have been enough to protect him.
Exactly.
And if it wasn't, who would have gone in his place, right? Who would they put him in the shard plate besides him? Who would have lasted not as long, and then he would have gone over, killed the bodyguards and the king.
Yeah, exactly.
So this was their best chance.
Yeah, and even Zeth almost loses, but the only reason why he wins is because his special abilities that he's able to have, and so it's crazy. And he puts increases the gravity on the balcony until it crashes down to the ground.
Yeah, he almost lost.
Yeah,
I think the only reason that he did win is because Elhokar didn't know about his abilities. Gavilar, sorry.
Yes.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yes.
Didn't know about his abilities and didn't know that he would be able to lash the balcony.
Yep, for sure. And he is shocked in that scene, right?
Yep.
And how cool is that when the balcony falls and then Zeth walks down the side of the wall?
Crazy. I envision that like it's a movie.
Oh man,
it's so cool.
It is such a movie scene. He's just brilliant at that.
They're going to be fantastic movies when they are made into movies someday to rival the Marvel universe. Mark my words.
Can you imagine, dude?
I can actually. I have been imagining this whole time.
It's going to be crazy. Then the final scene of that too, that was the other thing that just blew me away. The last message that he writes in Gavilar's blood. And
crazy to do
he says,
that.
Find the words that matter most. And he's telling a message for his brother.
No, we have to get the message right.
It's not the right words?
The most important words a man can say.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. This is why we have two people on the show.
Exactly.
This is two people here.
That's why you hired me for the show.
That's not why we hired you. I don't even know what to say about that. We're both here at our own volunteer. Whatever.
That's what he's telling you.
Yeah. Help.
So I will say I really want to get into the main part of the story.
Yeah.
Kaladin and Shallan.
Yeah. So which side do you want to go on first?
Oh, I'm always going to vote for the Kaladin side. I can't.
Incredible, right?
It's hard for me to even keep track of things as they swap back and forth. I know you and I have talked about this as we read through the books.
Yep.
But the swapping, especially right after a big reveal, it's hard. It's hard for me. It's hard to read through, and I'm like really getting into Kaladin's story, and then they're like, and Shallan was reading a book, drawing
You have to
something.
admit, though, it's a brilliant storytelling tactic,
Yes.
right? Because he gets a big reveal, and you're like, I want to hear more. But then when it cuts back, you're like, oh, it wasn't like that exciting the next part anyways.
Ironically enough, as I'm listening to the audiobook, the intensity of the moment with like Kaladin's story, or even sometimes Shallan's story as there's a big reveal,
right?
The momentum carries me through at least 20 minutes of the next section.
Is your adrenaline still pulsing? You're like,
yeah, I'm like, I gotta keep listening. And then it almost picks up the momentum in the next story. So I can understand that he is a fantastic author. And he knows what he's doing, and he obviously plays it well.
Yeah.
But sometimes when they switch over, there's a little part of me that's like, ugh.
Heartbroken.
I wish I could just skip through.
I would agree. I can't disagree with that. That's 100% true.
But I do want to start with Kaladin's story because I think that's so interesting.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see what massive story arc of character development they can go through in what is, a few chapters.
Oh, great. Yeah, well, he goes through years of story. Well, it's not years. It's months, I guess.
Well, if you include the surgery stuff, it's at least years.
Oh, true. Yeah, and you learn a ton about him. You feel like you know Kaladin within a few chapters.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like, and I know this is something that we've read a lot of books in just like business and self-help and all those besides the fantasy stuff that we enjoy. I think, and I know you agree with me here, is that these books sometimes can be even better.
Yeah. Right? It just gets you the whole anecdote almost, like of someone else's experience. And this is the funny thing, because this is a fiction book. It's fantasy. Mm-hmm. And the other books, the self-help books, are nonfiction. And they're specifically written to inspire you on how to be a better leader. But there are times in this book, and I had to hold myself back from talking to you about this the other day, because I'm like, I just got to save it for the podcast. But I love the deep thoughts that I start having on how can I be a better leader like Kaladin is. I'm learning more about what it's like to teach other people, lead other people, help those who are struggling, those people who are in the lowest of lows become the better people, the weak people. He does the example with bringing the 15-year-old in the army.
Yep.
He brings him into his army, and he's like, "What? You paid for me to be in your army? Like, why do you care about me?" And what does he say? He's like, "Well, Kaladin cares about the helpless ones," or something like that. He doesn't say that, but
the ones that need it, or something like that. I think it's interesting because you see a lot of juxtaposition of leadership across even just this first part of the book.
Oh,
and it's going to be even better through the rest of the series. I'm so excited for just this whole podcast.
Oh, man, I didn't even think about that. I love
just
that.
First off, even in this first part, let's take the example that we see. He joins Bridge 4. He's a slave. He gets branded Shash because he keeps trying to escape. He's killing people. He's doing stuff that he shouldn't be doing for the most part.
Yep.
And so he gets in a terrible situation. He's in Bridge 4 where everybody just goes to basically be killed. It's basically like a death sentence for sure. You're going to die. And even he talks about it in his first 2 weeks, 23 out of 25 people in his group died.
Oh, it's 23. It wasn't all of them. Is there any that are remaining by the end of that section?
I feel like there was one because he got transferred.
Oh, you're right. And so he technically wasn't with his original
So
group.
basically everyone, he said there are people that came in and have died since then. So everyone just goes into Bridge 4 to die. But what I think is interesting is Gaz is technically the leader, right?
Yeah.
He's the sergeant, I guess, of the bridge crews. And Kaladin, we know, is a leader, right? He's a natural leader. He jumps in and he takes charge of a situation. Maybe right now his resolve is a little bit broken because of the situations he's gone through and all of the difficult parts. But I still think his inherent leadership, his core value of looking out for other people and trying to support them and make them be the best that they can be, is still there, still burning bright, even though his resolve has weakened. But I love seeing the difference between Gaz and Kaladin, especially because it comes to a head right at the end. Right at the end of part 1, before the interludes, when he confronts Gaz and says, "It's over," right?
The coolest scene where he's holding him up, threatening him.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, but it's also that culmination of, you see Gaz, you see how scared he is. He's not confident in himself.
No, because he's not a leader.
Yeah, he's worried about his own position. He feels like his physical, just sergeanthood, his position that he's in physically is all that his leadership is. If he was taken out of that position, he would not be a leader in any sense of the word.
Yep.
Whereas Kaladin is not even a bridge leader or squad leader. He's literally just the guy in the back of the bridge, pulling it and pushing it. But he is the leader. He's the leader in the situation.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool. Like you said, better than a self-help book, better than an inspirational business story, because it tells you in such clear terms, the situation does not make the leader, but the leader makes the situation.
And it's also because you get to experience the emotion out of it, right? And like I said, it's a fake story. It's not real, but it feels real because Anderson just has such a handle on how people react to situations. They just react in such real ways. And I want to say, build on what you were saying there. One of the big reasons why he's a leader is because he cares about people. Yep. And you see that in that scene with Gaz, because he comes back, he's like, "I'm going to just want you to stay out of my storming way," right? And he goes into the barracks, and first thing he does is he wants to learn every single person's name. And he goes through and he starts repeating it to himself, okay, this is Teft, and this is so-and-so. He's like, "I don't care if I'm going to die tomorrow. I just need to do that, and it'll make me this is the good thing to do." And he talks about that warmth he gets inside from that.
We'll back up 3 pages, because before he leaves Gaz, he says he's going to pay him.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't just threaten him. He doesn't just say, "Look, man, I will beat you to a pulp if you don't just listen." He's way stronger. He's probably taller, at least he is in my mind.
Yeah.
He just has every reason to just be like, "Look, I'm just going to bully you 100%.
Yeah.
But he's like, "Here's the situation. I'm going to be stern with this because this is how it's going to be. You don't have a say in the matter, but I'm not going to leave you empty-handed. You will get something out of this. You'll feel like you're getting benefit out of this to the measure that you help."
Well, part of that is because Kaladin also understands people and how to read them, right? Because he was able to see Gaz, he cares about money, and so he needs a little something to keep him going and make sure that this isn't just turned into, "Well, I'm going to go report you to the army and you're going to be strung up in the high storm."
Which could have easily been.
Yep.
But he was at the point, Kaladin, I think, very similar to where Shallan ends up, where you're in desperation mode. You don't have, your back's against the wall, there are no other options. this has to succeed, and if it doesn't succeed, that's the end.
Yes, and I want to move on to Shallan in just a moment, but the last thing I want to say is that just really struck me is that Kaladin has been so depressed and beat down, and he goes to the honor chasm, about to commit suicide. Syl saves the day by giving him Blackbane leaf.
Irony.
The irony. It's such a great scene and like so touching. Like just Syl is just amazing, just innocent. But then he comes back and he starts saying, I have a resolve now to start helping people again and giving myself purpose. But what's amazing with that is it doesn't cure his sadness. At the end, he says, I still feel super like upset about this, depressed, tired. And it just goes to show, yes, you can make the good choices and be the hero, make the heroic choices, but not feel like the hero in the moment. And I thought that was just super powerful at the same time. I loved that.
That's pretty fantastic. I will hold my further comments to the spoiler episode that we record right after this.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that is an interesting point to make for sure. And I will probably leave it at that. But if you want to watch the spoiler episode, it'll come out tomorrow.
You got it. Come out tomorrow.
Okay.
Let's talk about Shallan a bit too, because she is completely different. Because she's not coming from a place of honor.
She's not in physical pain.
No. But she's coming from a place of desperation to try and save her family. Which you could say there's an honor in that in some sort, but she's approaching it in a very different way than Kaladin, right? She's a thief. She's
intending to be. I have a hard time sometimes as I read that because it doesn't even feel like she just seems so confused. Like she's just going into it from a sense of, I know this is what I need to do, and I know what to save my family, but the way she goes about talking to people and interacting with people, and you think about how she interacts with the sailors, with Yalb.
Oh,
and
yeah. I love that.
She develops such an interesting friendship with a lot of them, and it feels like she's trying to put so much into this relationship with Jasnah. Like, you feel like with the creativity that she has, she would have almost just figured out a way to steal the
Soulcaster.
The Soulcaster, thank you. The Soulcaster, even without making friends with her, becoming her ward, doing all these things. Like, I feel like she would have hatched a plan if she didn't have some sort of element of, she does really want to learn. Like, she's going into that. She's like, oh, you know what? Out of this, I could become a ward and become Jasnah's ward, who's basically the most refined, educated person in the kingdom. I think she's really excited about that.
Yes, and I will admit, I think Shallan's story for me is at least the weaker of the two stories. I don't enjoy it as much, but I do still find things that I really love about her story. Yep. Like you said, I love her drive to learn. It inspires me to like, oh, I got to be excited about learning all of these things. She's excited to not only learn books because that's what Jasnah suggests to her, but she's like, there's a fifth kingdom? I only had an idea there was only 4 kingdoms or whatever. What's this fifth that I've never heard of? So she's legitimately excited about that. And that shows a lot about her, but also it's cool for us as well just to show that excitement. But I like that a lot.
I think he does a good job. Brandon Sanderson does a good job of bringing you into each of those stories and making them real. His understanding of people, we've talked about this, is pretty freaking awesome. It blows my mind every time. The politics that he brings into all these books. Book 3, the politics, I absolutely love it. We'll talk about that a lot, probably in a few months.
Yep.
But do we have any moments, do you think? I know we only have one thing on our top 3 list so far, and it's just Szeth's assassination. Do you have any moments in Shallan's story that you'd like to add to that list?
Yeah, so let's actually go through all of them real quick on what we think of the top 3 are out of the whole reading. So
part 1.
For the reading for part 1, it includes the interludes as well.
Yep.
I would say that Shallan, that scene where Jasnah walks up to the rock and uses the Soulcaster for the first time, is also one of my favorite scenes in the book. Just because that whole thing where she transforms the rock, you get to see, I don't know, I'd never seen anything like this in a story before, where it just explodes into smoke, goes everywhere. The Parshmen are cleaning up afterwards, like just the small details. It was just a cool scene to me. I love that.
No, it's a super good one.
Yeah. Are there any other scenes that you're thinking about adding to it?
Okay, I honestly think one of my favorite parts that we just talked about is gotta have to be on the list. It's when Kaladin comes back from the Honor Chasm and just absolutely lays it into Gas and just says, this is how things are going to change and this is who I am. I think taking that from maybe a wider perspective and understanding how much of a shift that was for Kaladin in general, coming from like being about to commit suicide, going all the way through that emotional change to say, you know what, I'm going after this, and then laying it into Gaz was pretty cool. Yeah. That's going to have to be on my list at least.
Also just a huge moment in
It was
general.
it's a pivotal moment. It's cool. It's intense. It was written intensely. I like it.
I just love it. How he describes like lifting him up, like, listen, Gaz, like it's just like, wow,
not even a name.
Get him, like
you just don't like him.
Yeah,
his name's Gaz, and you're like, I just don't like him.
Kind of sounds like gas, kind of weird. but I love that. I guess, and another part that I want to kind of throw in there for our consideration, would be
throw it on the pile.
Yeah. That opening scene with the first time he runs the bridge 4, all the way up through the arrows and running barefoot and everything. The first bridge run. First bridge run, we'll call it that.
Okay, first bridge run. Yeah. So we have 3. I'm going to add another one to the pile.
Yeah. Well, I got to describe why I like the bridge run.
Okay. I'll let you make your case before I blow it out of the water.
It's not going to get blown out of the water. It's the best scene.
Okay, go ahead.
I love the bridge scene. It was a scene that I love so much. I even had to like pause. I'm like, tell my wife, I'm like, Mulia, like you gotta at least. I know you're not listening to the books with me right now, but you gotta listen to this part. I'll give you some background of what's going on. But is this not the craziest scene? You've done that before too. Oh, yeah. It's so fun, and I'm sure our wives are like, whatever.
They're very patient.
They're very patient and very kind, and we're glad that they
indulge us.
Yes, that's what the word I'm looking for. But that whole scene of him running to the bridges because the alarm goes off, and he's like, okay, like his bridge run. He's like, okay, I guess I'm gonna go do this. He's like, you're on bridge 4. Gets put in the back. Then they go all the way through this endless running barefoot, and then he gets to the first place where they lay down the bridge, and he's like, well, that was terrible. And they're like, dude, we're not even halfway there. And it's just that moment of despair it gives, at least to me as the reader. I'm like, oh my gosh, this sounds like the worst endurance run of all time. Makes me feel like I've never
shoulder.
Yeah, I'm like, I've never suffered anything hard in my entire life. And then to end it all, he gets there to get shot at by arrows. Everyone's dying around him. They move him to the front of the bridge. Like, how brutal is that?
To run straight toward the waiting archers.
Yeah, and the way he describes that he, like, you can't stop, but you're wanting to stop, but you just have to keep going. But the momentum of the bridge is even carrying you forward. It's just...
Gotta be terrifying. It's just harrowing, I think, is an even better word for that.
Yep, and then they have to go back after all that.
Yeah, they have to hike the whole thing back with less people because everyone died along the way.
Oh my gosh.
Okay,
what a crazy scene.
That's a good case.
It'd be a great TV scene too, by the way. I would love
that. The whole thing is going to be a fantastic series. I'm so excited.
Fantastic.
I think... Oh man, I really like that. That was well presented. I'm going to give you that one.
Thank you.
It's probably going to go on the top.
I should write a book.
Just kidding. Maybe don't go that far. I think I want to add for your consideration.
Okay.
The opening prelude with the heralds.
Really?
I've gone back in my mind.
This is the scene that you just said that most people would not like.
Which is why I think it needs to go on the list. To let people realize that they should go back and read it again.
Okay.
And that's kind of a sneaky way to put it into the list, almost like a backshadowing.
Okay.
But
backshadowing.
To go back
Love it.
And to say maybe we should read that again.
Is that a real term, backshadowing?
No.
Oh. Okay.
It'd probably be called anti-shadowing. That's what I'm gonna. That sounds
against
really
shadowing?
Smart.
Well, okay.
No, anti with an E, like.
Okay.
Like
gotcha.
AM is anyway.
Antenna.
Antimeridian.
AM. FM radio.
AM is antimeridian.
I
PM
gotcha,
is postmeridian. So it makes sense.
Hey, word of the day.
Anyway, the point being, I do think that it's worth going back to if you haven't read the Stormlight Archive yet. So maybe read books 1 and 2.
Yep.
Maybe 3.
Maybe 4.
If you get to 4, fine.
If you get to 4, like if you got to 3, you have to read 4.
I'm saying before you go back to your anti-shadowing.
Okay, got it.
So go back and reread the Herald's story because I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
Maybe as we reread, we will tell people at what point they should go back. I think that would be cool.
I think that'd be way cool.
Because I don't know if I had that in, like when I first read it, like I mentioned, I just blow through it and like I'm never gonna read that again. And now that I read it again, I'm really glad that I did. So
yeah,
I would say that was a weird way of explaining why I think it should go on the list, but it is submit for your consideration.
Well, let me throw in some extra thoughts on that first, on that very first scene.
Save it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that first scene, I'm a huge fan of Lost. Controversial,
absolutely.
hot take. Yes.
Maybe that'll be another episode of the podcast.
That's right. But all those scenes in Lost where they have like that crazy like music in the background that's really mysterious and everything, and like they have like their like. I
was gonna say I would sing it, but I want people to keep watching.
I know, but that's the music I imagine in that very first scene. It's just because it's like, what is going on? Like ominous, mysterious, very Lost-esque part of the book. That's one of the reasons why I
hope
love
they call us when they turn this into a TV series.
Oh yeah,
I think that'd be very important for them to get our feedback.
Yeah, we'll throw in directly the J.J. Abrams Lost music.
I need to connect them to Hans Zimmer. I need to connect them to J.J. Abrams.
Yes, and I used to know the guy who did the music for Lost, but anyways, his music's fantastic. So
yeah,
needs to be.
I'm trying to decide. I'm thinking now about casting the whole movie, so maybe that has to be another episode.
Okay.
But
I've got some thoughts.
We'll throw that into a special episode.
Okay, so we've got our scenes. So we have four of them.
4 of them. Yeah, I submitted for your consideration the Herald scene at the beginning.
Yes.
And when he takes on gas and becomes the
leader
that we know that he is.
Yeah,
I didn't mention one. That's why I had another one that I wanted to add.
Well, no, we had Szeth with the assassin in white. We talked about the very beginning.
Add it. Yep.
And then we talked about the bridge
smoke.
Crews and the smoke.
Bridge. Holy cow, we do have 5. We need to narrow this down.
But let's go down to 3, and then we'll do like a rolling best scenes.
Okay, well I'm going to take one out then that I think doesn't need to be in the top 3.
Okay, what doesn't belong?
I think converting the stone to smoke is cool,
yes,
but it's not a top 3.
Okay, I will agree with you. Let's just throw it out.
What are you going to take out?
I'll tell you what I think should be number 1. I think number 1 should be for me, I think the running the bridge should be number 1. I think Szeth should be number 2. What are the other 2 that we've got?
It's Kaladin and Gaz.
Kaladin and Gaz.
And you added Szeth already?
Yeah, Szeth is number 2.
Well, then it's the Heralds.
Oh, the Heralds. Then,
I'm going to refute your order and say we should do number 1, Kaladin and the Bridge.
Okay.
Because you're right. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
But 2 should be Heralds. And
really?
3 should be Szeth's assassination.
Szeth's assassination definitely needs to be in the top 3. I agree.
And it is. It's number 3.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. You don't think that Szeth and the assassination would be number 2? That is just such like an all-encompassing scene. I think the Herald scene is very good.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's more just mysterious than.
Okay, I'll give you this. If anyone comments that Szeth's scene should be better than the Herald scene, we'll change the order. One person. If anyone comments that, we'll change it.
Dude,
otherwise it stays.
Dude, I would say if
it can't be you or your wife.
Okay. I would say we could get 5 easy. Like I think that it should be that unanimous.
I'll keep the bar low and say if anyone comments that they've listened this far into the podcast, they can help us switch the order.
Really want to leave our power ranking at Szeth at number 3?
Yeah, I do.
You think the Herald is better than that?
I think it is.
Why is that?
I'm just saying it's more pivotal. Like Szeth's is cool.
Yeah.
We'll learn a lot more about it. It's cool that we learn about lashings and all that stuff, but it's not going to retain its weight across the book.
I guess I want to know, so what are your criteria for like ranking these things then?
How it impacts the entire series.
How it impacts
it's not. I know you're really going for cinematic power.
I know. It's because I want these to be in a movie so bad. Okay, I guess I'll start adding criteria then for me. So I want it has to have cinematic power. It has to just be a cool scene.
Fine.
Then we might actually just
imagine the Heralds with Lost. Then there's your cinematic power.
There we go. The problem with this though is like we get into Sanderlanche and like everything just
the entire end of the book is going to have to be our whole top 10.
Have to be it. But for now,
impactfulness has to be a criteria.
Yes. No. That's what I was going to say.
We'll give you that cinematic weight.
Yes.
Whatever. We'll
has
think
to
of
be
a word for it.
Yep.
Then the second one has to be how pivotal it is to the course of the book.
Yeah.
Like if you were to tell someone about the book, would you put it in your top 3 of like, oh, I want to tell you about this scene? And I'll be honest, Kaladin and Gaz probably wouldn't be on that list. Yep. So I can understand why it didn't make the top 3.
And that's why the changing the rock to smoke would not be. But I would still say that Szeth is pretty dang important. There are parts in there, like, did we talk about the writing in blood? Yeah. He just talks about, like, find the words that matter most.
The most important words a man can say.
I said it wrong again.
I said it wrong again. It's the most important.
I just have to have it written down somewhere. I don't remember the words that a man should say.
I think we leave it to the comment section.
Okay, cool.
I think we can leave it at an impasse that both are number 2, tied for number 2.
Okay,
and then based on comment count, one way or the other, we will make our decision next week.
Yep, there will be a change next week. Maybe all 3 of them will stay the same if there's nothing more impactful.
Whoa, they don't get to change. No. This is our show. Number 1 stays number 1.
Oh, no. You misunderstand, because as we go forward, the next part, we'll have more parts to consider.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right. I'm saying from the comments perspective,
yes.
They can change what becomes number 2 and number 3 for this episode.
Oh, yeah.
We're only giving them that opportunity this time.
I think I would even say that it would just influence our thoughts as if it should stay in the number 1, 2, or 3.
That
in the next
absolutely makes sense. Yes, I'm with you on that.
Okay,
and I do hope that as we kind of wrap this up, everyone continues to read through with us, because it's really important for the podcast, for the conversations that we can have. And if you have any cool questions or things you want us to talk through about your reading of the book, please leave those in the comment section as well. It's really, I mean, if you can read it along with us, we're reading through to the next set of interludes.
Yep.
And we're just
Part 2, interludes,
yeah.
right after that as well.
So read through that before next week's episode. We'll post it around the same time during the week, and we'll just continue to enjoy the Way of Kings altogether.
Yeah, and like we said before, you guys definitely know more than us, and so feel free to correct us on things that you noticed or just other cool parts that you wanted to chat about. We love to hear it. So we'll chat about it more next time, and catch us in the spoiler video if you've already read all the books already, and we'll have some comments there.
Yep, that'll drop tomorrow, so don't forget to subscribe, like this video if you haven't already. We're really excited to see you in the next one.
And press that little alert button as well to remind you when a video's coming out.
See ya.